The opening.
All right, welcome everyone to today's Google Webmaster Central Office Hours Hangouts. My name is John Mueller. I'm a Webmaster Trends Analyst here at Google in Switzerland. And part of what we do is talk with webmasters and publishers like those here in the Hangout. Bunch of questions already got submitted. I kind of reorganized them a little bit. But if there's anyone here in the Hangout Live who hasn't had a chance to ask a question, one of the few earlier ones, feel free to jump on in and ask away. I see a lot of familiar faces, so maybe not that many. OK. Otherwise, we'll get to kind of the more open Q&A part later on as well.
Hey, John, I was having a little microphone issue, so I just did have a question. We recently did an article that was, we uncovered basically a fraudulent scam kind of thing that's going on Craigslist a lot. The article's got a lot of good interaction from people finding other URLs that people are using for the same scam. And what we're concerned about is actually putting the URLs in our articles. Our concern would be that the algorithm would see that and think that we're linking out to these fraudulent websites. We would never want to actually put a link to the site, but we're concerned about even mentioning the actual names of the URLs on the site. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
I wouldn't worry about that. You're essentially kind of providing a reference to that content. That adds value to what you're providing there. So I think that's fine.
Thanks.
What I'm curious about is because those manual actions disappear.
Oops. One more question? Otherwise, we'll get to that, I guess, later on. Let me see if the select button works. Oh, that works great, too. We implemented AMP on our blog. However, it's not being recognized in Google Search Console. Do we have to implement a schema blog post markup for AMP to show up, or is this not necessary as long as the correct link rel AMP HTML is placed? So for us at the moment, we show AMP pages in the search results with that kind of little carousel or the direct link to the AMP pages when they're both valid AMP, so they're valid AMP pages, and they use one of the supported structured data schema.org types. So that, at the moment, I believe is just blog posting and news article. So if you have both kind of the valid AMP page and one of these markup types, then we'll be able to pick that up. We're working on kind of expanding that to different types of markup as well. So I assume that will kind of spread out a little bit. But at the moment, you have to have one of those two types. Let me see. Next question. We have a separate dynamic desktop website and a single-page website for mobile. How can titles and meta tags be handled for a single-page website? So in this case, what's probably happening there is we're not linking the desktop page with the mobile pages because they're very different websites. So on the one hand, probably the desktop website has all of these different pages, and the mobile is just a single URL. So in a case like that, we don't have the ability to kind of link those pages together and say, this is the mobile version of this desktop page. So what would happen there is we probably index those pages separately. On the one hand, the different desktop pages, and on the other hand, the single mobile pages that you have there as well. Let me see. Next question here. If I can get these to load. OK, I can't find it. Let me just read it from my notes. How is it possible for a no-index page to rank? For example, a mobile subdomain with no index for the entire subdomain. In general, if a page has a no index on it, we'll drop it from our search results. So if your mobile pages have a no index on them, we'll probably drop those from the search results and not be able to take them into account. So if you have separate mobile URLs that you want to have indexed, you need to make sure that you're following our guidance for mobile web pages. which would mean that, for example, you have the rel canonical pointing to the desktop page, and from the desktop page, the rel alternate pointing to the mobile page, so that we understand that these pages belong together and that we just show one of them in the search results at any given time. Let's see, next one here. For our hreflang tags, can we combine any language and country code supported in the respective ISO documents? For example, Russian and Brazil. Yes, you can. If you have content for that specific kind of niche environment, then you're welcome to say you have content for Russian speakers who are located in Brazil. That might be a fairly small market, but maybe that's kind of directly what you're targeting. So that would be kind of fine if you had it like that. Another internationalization question. In addition to the native language, we also serve English content on subfolders for all our international websites. Should we be indicating this via hreflang tags? So the English country code for each country. So I guess in this case, the English language code for each country, yes, you can do that. Kind of like similar to the Russian in Brazil, you can say English in France to really target English speakers in France if you wanted to really provide them with a unique experience. This one's kind of similar in the internationalization area. Can subdomains absorb some of the domain authority from the top-level domain? For example, will all my international websites, which sit on subdomains, get ranking boost from the top-level domain? So domain authority is kind of a theme picked up by SEO companies or SEO tools, so it's not really something that we have here at Google. But in general, we do try to understand what belongs together. Kind of like if you have different subdomains, and we recognize this is all the same website due to maybe your hreflang links between these pages, then that's something we'll pick up there. And kind of try to treat that as one website.
John, can I have a follow-up on that?
Sure.
So regarding, let's say you have an international website and you have multiple TLDs geo-targeted to each of the countries you have a presence in. You mentioned that hreflang doesn't impact ranking. It's just a way for Google to swap the correct URL based on who you're targeting with. However, does it help in any way for you to understand that two TLDs belong to the same brand, or two or more TLDs belong to the same brand in any way, so you can kind of understand it as a one entity, one website, so to say?
So the hreflang essentially tells us that these pages are alternatives of the same content. So in a way, I guess that does give us that connection between those different TLDs if you have it set up like that. I wouldn't say that it would automatically fold everything together and say we're talking about the same entity all the time, but it definitely, on a page-by-page basis, gives us that connection between those different pages, even if they're on different top-level domains.
So let me give you an example. Let's say Amazon launches tomorrow in Romania, and there hasn't been any Amazon in Romania, so they just launched Amazon.ro. Since Amazon is a very big authoritative brand, would it make a difference for them in ranking terms if they implement hreflang between everything or not? Or would you see it just as a brand new website, so they have to kind of pick up everything from scratch?
I guess if their, let's say, .com website would be ranking otherwise in Romania, then we would swap those out. It's not so much that it would make kind of their set of websites more visible, but rather that it would show the appropriate one. So instead of the English one ranking in Romania, we'd be able to show the direct Romanian one in the search results. So it's not so much that it gets more visibility, but rather it's clear that this is the local result, it's in the right language, it's kind of ranking where it would normally be ranking.
Or where it would normally be ranking for the same queries, because I assume if it's a Romanian query, Romanian, let's say it has some Romanian keywords, the Amazon.com website wouldn't normally rank. So,
Yeah.
so in that case, the Amazon.ro website doesn't necessarily mean it would rank either.
It doesn't get any bonus just because it has that hreflang connection to it. So if that's the only place we find the Romanian content, then that has to rank on its own. It's not that there's any kind of additional bonus for, like, well, the English version is very popular, therefore the Romanian version also has to be popular. It's kind of like, I guess in this case, a big brand coming into a country doesn't necessarily mean that that big brand will automatically be relevant for all of the local queries. It kind of has to build that up over time, too.
Right, so in that case, would you say that instead of a separate TLD for each country, they would do the .com/ro or something like that? Would that help them a bit when they launch that subfolder based on the authority or whatever metrics you have for the whole domain?
I don't know. I assume not so much. There might be some kind of like edge effects or indirect effects, but not that I'd say you need to kind of piggyback off of your old .com to get the most out of your local content.
Right, so you're still basing your relevance based on the content that is on the actual pages over there, and if it's relevant, then okay.
Yeah, I mean, it might be different if the old .com page had some Romanian content already, and then you have the Romanian page as well. Then that's something where we'd show maybe the Romanian page based on the .com's ranking, and the hreflang kind of swapping it out for the real Romanian version.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll definitely see this effect more for, I guess, branded queries, where if someone is searching for Amazon, and we know that there's this Amazon.com and the local Amazon, and we can swap those out, then that's one place you'll definitely see that a lot stronger.
Mm-hmm.
That's also one of the places where you can kind of tell if you have your hreflang markup set up properly, where if you search for your local, for your brand name, and you know you have different versions there, and we don't bring the right local version, then probably the hreflang between the homepage versions isn't set up properly.
Right, yeah.
All right. There was a question about structured data. Is this HTML structure for a website logo better for Google? Basically, putting the logo and a link to the homepage within H1 tag. It's really up to you how you want to structure your pages there. So one thing I would do is, especially on the homepage, make sure that you've marked up your logo properly, so that it's clear that we can kind of extract that and show that in the knowledge panel as well. But apart from that, if you put it in H1 or not, that kind of depends on the structure of your pages on your website. Maybe for the homepage, it makes sense to structure everything under your brand. Maybe for the individual product pages, you have the H1 as the specific product that you're looking at. Let's see here. In order to help find the root cause for an increase in time spent downloading a page in milliseconds, is there a way to get more granularity, such as a sample of the pages affected? No, not directly in Search Console, at least. What you can do is, of course, look into your server logs to see if you have any information there. Depending on what information you're logging, you might have more information or less information. But at least in Search Console, we basically just have the aggregated charts with the total time per day that we spent downloading content from your website. And just to clarify, this number that we show there is per URL. So it's not the rendering of the pages, it's actually downloading the individual pieces of content within those pages. And sometimes what can happen is if you have really large files on your server, such as really large PDF files, then that obviously also kind of falls into that as well, where maybe it takes a long time to download these multi-megabyte PDF files, and that's kind of skewing the time that you're seeing there. In general, we try to spread out our crawling a little bit, but these kind of clumping can sometimes happen. let's see. We have a handful of clients that use a preloader. Sometimes Google renders the site without issues. Other times it gets stuck in the preloader. Can you speak on why this might happen? Could our content be devalued if Google doesn't render the page? So I guess to the last part, if we can't render the page, then we have a lot of trouble trying to understand what's actually shown on these pages. So with that said, if we can't pull out your content, then we can't really rank that content, right? So that's something where we kind of need to be able to get into to at least see which content you're providing on those pages. With regards to understanding when it gets stuck in that preloader, that's something that we don't really have direct diagnostics tools on that to kind of tell you which URL at which time got stuck during rendering. But you can test it using the fetch and render tool in Search Console to kind of double check, is this URL able to be rendered properly? So that's kind of the approach I would use there. Another no-index question. What's the best way to handle thousands of indexed URLs from faceted navigation? No index, follow those pages, and no follow the links on them. Or just straight robots text disallow. So on the one hand, we have a blog post about faceted navigation. I definitely check that out. On the other hand, if these are pages where we don't need to kind of crawl through them to see links to the individual product pages, then you can definitely no index, no follow those pages so that we kind of don't get stuck following the path down the faceted navigation so that we don't end up in kind of this infinite URL space. I wouldn't use the robots text disallow for something like that, because then we can't crawl them at all. And if we see links to those pages, then we can't follow them to see what's actually found there. So if you're sure that we can navigate your website normally, I maybe put a no index, no follow, maybe after the first or second or third page, however far you want to go. And otherwise, kind of let us crawl those pages so that we can get to everything in there.
Is using canonicals also a good option?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's something you can also do. Probably what will happen there is, so I assume you mean something like take the canonical from page 3 to page 1 so that we focus on page 1, something like that, right?
Well, faceted navigation usually refers to filters, so I'm assuming you would canonicalize like a filtered page with multiple filters applied to the non-filtered category.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you can do that too. Like if you have different levels and different pages, that's something you can kind of canonicalize that together. Sometimes what will happen is we won't follow the canonical because the pages are very different. So if that's a problem for you, then maybe like allow the first page to be indexed like that, and then the follow pages with no index, no follow, so that they do kind of drop out. From our point of view, it's not so much a problem that we think these pages are low quality or bad. It's just that we get stuck crawling millions of different variations, and that doesn't help your site. That doesn't help us so much. So we have to kind of algorithmically figure out which of these pages we want to focus on.
Okay, but if we do use canonical and Googlebot crawls those pages once, twice, after the canonical is taken into consideration, those variations won't be crawled anymore, right?
Yeah.
Also, we can use a no follow attribute on the actual links instead of using the no follow.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Since the Q&A is actually working this time, let me start with the next questions on here. What version would be the best mobile version of a site? Mobile, responsive, or AMP? AMP is speedy but poor user experience. Mobile responsive, better user experience, lower speed. So it's a matter of speed versus user experience. I don't know. Best version of a site is hard to say. Personally, I think this is kind of depends on the way that you set up your pages, the kind of content you have. If you have content that's really well suited for AMP, maybe using it with AMP is a good idea. Maybe having like a desktop and an AMP page is a good idea. Maybe you have 3 versions of a page, a desktop and mobile, or a desktop and responsive and AMP page. So it kind of depends on your website. I think at the moment this is something that's kind of left up to you to figure out what makes sense for your specific use case. So specifically around AMP, at the moment we're only showing that for newsy type content. So if you have something like an e-commerce shop, or if you have a website that doesn't have any kind of newsy content on it at all, then probably spending your time on AMP is something that you might want to kind of defer until later when we do take this into account and show that kind of content within the AMP carousels, or when other sites use that kind of content in their AMP embeds as well.
Hey, John, just following up on that, basically because of the fact that we saw it appear in Webmaster Tools, it started making us think that this might be something that would be considered important in the future. However, on the other hand, like mobile network speed and everything keeps getting faster and faster. So what would you suggest as far as just looking down the road for like a normal site that uses some JavaScript and things like that, which is not allowed by AMP? What would you suggest that we do, and do you think it's going to become important for all sites in the future?
I don't know. If I had my crystal ball, I would be able to tell you. My hunch is that the AMP team is moving very quickly, and we'll be including more and more different types of content as AMP formatted content. So I think for a lot of the kind of informational content, that's something where at some point, maybe in the next year or in this year, we'll have more and more of that content actually used in the search results as AMP. If you have something like an interactive website, that's obviously a bit harder. But for all of these, it's like we're looking into the future. And if you need to focus your energies now and you say, well, I have a developer who's available, and I need to tell them what to do for this month or this quarter or this half year, then if you're not in a niche where AMP content is currently shown, then probably you should focus on other aspects first.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, John, can I jump in with a quick, I think it's a search bug, actually.
OK.
So if you do a search, I'll paste it here in the chat. I'll actually say it out loud so people at home can do this too. I don't care if people see this. It doesn't matter to me. It's a website called Bathroom Guru Review. So if you search Bathroom Guru Review, all one word, that'll be their brand name, I guess, or their domain name without the suffix. You get really interesting results. So if you scroll down to the related searches, I don't know what you guys see, but for related searches, I see a really interesting kind of related searches. Instead, this is a site that is about do-it-yourself bathroom renovations. It's a blog all about DIY bathroom renovations. So presumably, any searches related to this brand should be other bathroom renovation blogs, I would imagine. I could be wrong there. But it doesn't seem that Hummingbird knows what this website is about. It hasn't figured out this entity yet. I get Guru Movie Review, Love Guru Review, Guru Bikes Review, Guru Energy Drink Review, stuff like that. So it looks like Hummingbird is getting caught up in the word guru in the domain name or something. And the other interesting thing is that the word, usually on the Google SERP, Google will only bold keywords and synonyms of keywords to, I guess, display that to the user. But in the related searches, it's bolding the word movie, it's bolding the word love, it's bolding the word bikes. So it really looks like Hummingbird is confused as to what this entity is supposed to be about. And so I'm wondering if this is a bug, or the other interesting thing is that this site actually, I think, was hit by Panda and may have also been hit by Penguin. So my question is, does Google make a determination if a site is really looking low quality and looking spammy? Does Hummingbird decide not to bother reading that entity, or decides it's not worth the time, the CPU cycles, or is it just a bug?
I suspect what's happening there is where to come up with related searches there, and it's not so those related searches aren't related to any kind of web quality evaluations of those sites. So usually what happens is if a site is really unknown, then probably there are no related searches there. If you're searching for something that's really hard to pull apart, like if you're searching for this as one word, then that's really hard to kind of figure out what exactly you're trying to look for. Sometimes what will happen is it'll try to figure out which kind of typos could fit in there. So it's like if you're like off by one, or if you have your letters slightly transposed, sometimes there are typos that fall into place there. I don't know if that's specifically happening in this case. With regards to the bolding, that's not like we're flagging these as synonyms or anything like that.
I see. So either they chose a bad domain name that's kind of confusing Google, or they just need to be more authoritative.
I think in a case like this, what will help is just that we have more information about this website, so that we kind of understand what this website is about, what people search for around this website, those kind of things. So it's not so much that we're trying to figure this out all on our own. We really need all of those signals to kind of come together and say, well, this is the general picture, and these are kind of the different attributes that also fit into this picture. And I suspect in this case we're just kind of clutching at straws, and it's like, well, this could theoretically match a little bit. It's not great, but it's like something to get people to search further.
Right. Okay, perfect. Thanks a lot, John.
Sure. All right, let me run through some more of these questions, and then we'll open it up for all kinds of more questions from you all. Is there any way to check if a site is hit by Penguin other than looking at Google Analytics data? No, I don't think so. I mean, we don't have any Penguin testing tool. Let's put it like that. For some of these sites, looking at analytics data is a good way to understand when things change. But sometimes that can be kind of misleading, where if you make bigger changes on your website, or bigger changes happen in the general ecosystem around your website towards the same days, then that's really hard to pick up on. With sites such as Groupon's directory, why aren't these pages a violation of Google's quality guidelines, yet showing up highly in search results? In general, for like very specific queries, it's probably best to either send me a note directly or post in the help forum, because I can't really look at these on the fly to see what specifically is happening there, and I definitely don't know those pages. So I need to kind of double check to see what's happening there. On-page tips for an e-commerce site. That's a very big topic. I don't know if I have any direct tips that I can say like all e-commerce sites should be doing. In general, we try to treat e-commerce sites similarly to normal other websites. So we want to see that these websites have something unique and compelling, something of high quality of their own, that we can actually show them in the search results. And that's sometimes easier if you have a really specific niche that you're active in. Sometimes it's a bit harder if you're mostly an affiliate, or if you're reselling a lot of products that are available in lots of different other places. Then you really kind of have to carve out that unique niche of your own in a different way. So as much as possible, my recommendation would be to really make sure that you have something on your website that's really unique and compelling on your site that other people can't copy. So if you're just trying to copy other big e-commerce sites with the same products, with the same descriptions, then probably that's going to be hard for us to actually show in the search results. Whereas if you have a unique spin on something, and you know people are looking for that unique kind of thing that you're providing on your site, then that makes it a lot easier for us to say, oh, well, this site does exactly what you're looking for, therefore we'll show it in top in the search results. Redirecting a Penguin-affected site to a new domain, will the penalty also be transferred? So in general, if you have problems with regards to your links to your website and you redirect that website to a new website, then those problems kind of get transferred as well, because those links, the page rank from those links gets forwarded to the new redirect target. So if you're in the situation where you have web spam problems with your links, you really need to clean up those links first as well. Google deprecated the Ajax crawling scheme, which has led to a surge in single-page app, Angular, JS, React.js sites, but we're seeing most are not rendered crawled, even though JavaScript and CSS are accessible. What else can developers check to get pages rendered and crawled? So it would be news to me that if most can't get crawled and rendered properly, because we do work really hard to make sure that that actually works. So in this specific case, if you have a bunch of examples, feel free to send them my way, because we really want that to actually work properly. So I posted a bunch of tips maybe a month ago about especially rendering pages, what to watch out for. I definitely double-check that. I certainly use the fetch and render tool in Search Console to see how these pages are actually rendered. I also do that for desktop and mobile, so that you're sure that both the desktop and the mobile versions are actually being picked up properly. I think those are pretty much the main things there. Another thing I mentioned in that post is that there are some JavaScript or HTML5 methods that aren't supported by Googlebot yet. So those are some things to kind of watch out for. You'll definitely see that as well in the rendered view, because the rendered view won't work if we can't support the elements that you're actually using. But again, if you have a lot of sites, or you're working with other people's sites that aren't working the way that they should in search with regards to JavaScript, then by all means let me know. Send me some examples so that we can check them out with the team. My client's site got hacked in February. It's now cleaned up, and the hacked pages have been removed using Search Console. However, these pages are still showing up in Google search results. Could these be causing a problem? Traffic is down 25%. So I'm not really sure how you remove those pages if they're still being shown. So that's maybe one thing to kind of double check. If you've removed those pages just from your website and they're being shown for normal search results, then that's something I definitely clean up. If those hacked pages are just being shown for things like site queries or artificial queries that you put together with different pharmaceutical names and your site name, then I wouldn't worry so much about that, because those will drop out on their own anyway, and no normal user will kind of run across those anyway. With regards to the traffic being down, that's something where I'd probably post in the help forum, or come to one of the office hours, or send me a link directly so that we can take a look there. Because usually if you take a hacked website and you clean the hack out, then it should kind of return to the previous state. Very commercial search result in our marketplace shows a big featured snippets. It looks like a big ad, but for one company. The search term isn't a question, and many companies compete, so surely it's wrong. What can we do? We reported it, but no result. So I think this is one I actually passed on to the team just before the Hangout. But again, kind of like with other specific queries or examples, these are things which are easier passed on if you send them to me either directly on Google+, or post in the help forum so that we can pick them up there together with the top contributors in the forum. So I think in this case, I pass that on, but it's ultimately a decision on the team that works on these snippets to kind of like figure out what should we be showing as a bigger snippet and what makes sense to kind of show as a normal snippet.
John, I was going to ask the same question actually, because I did a search the other day for for coffee makers or coffee something, and one of the big UK sites here had a knowledge panel entry for that. I just stuck it in the chat, where it's. I mean, it's an interesting result because Argos is obviously a very well-known retailer here.
Yeah.
But it surely doesn't mean they should get a panel like that showing.
We see these as bigger snippets, and for normal snippets, it would make sense to show something like this. So I don't know how the product team would see something like this, especially if, I mean, I don't know this brand in particular, but if this is like the generic answer everyone is looking for, then it makes sense to show something like this. Maybe it doesn't make sense. But this is the kind of stuff I love passing on to the team because it gives them something to think about, to kind of consider, do they need to change the policy? Do they need to kind of algorithmically catch these cases better? Or is this something that they have to manually catch, kind of handle like that?
So you think that box there is a product?
I don't know. I really don't know this specific case there. I'd have to dig into that.
Right. I mean, to be fair, they are one of the biggest retailers in the UK. So it's not, you wouldn't not find what you were looking for. But they're certainly not an authority on pod coffee makers.
Then maybe we shouldn't be showing it. Yeah. I don't know. I guess when we put together the search results algorithmically, sometimes things like this can happen, and it's definitely useful food for our engineers to see. Well, we have a policy like this, but our algorithms aren't picking up the policy properly.
So they did have a little link on there to say about this result, but I can't actually replicate that now. So maybe it was
I don't know, or maybe
can't
it was
replicate that result anymore. Yeah. Now it's not showing, and bizarrely, they're for the same search term. They're now ranking below the one below them. So they've moved.
I don't know. I'll send this one on to their team to kind of double check. Okay, one more question set up here, and then we can move to, I guess, a more general Q&A. Does it make sense to implement AMP pages on non-publisher sites? So I guess we touched upon this briefly before, but actually in the situation where if you want to have your AMP pages shown in this carousel format, then that's something that currently doesn't happen with content that's not kind of newsy, that's not fitting into that AMP carousel. But at the same time, you can make AMP pages that can be used normally. So I don't know, this week I ran across a site that made all of their mobile pages with AMP. So that's one option. In the early phase of the AMP trials, one of the beta testers moved their whole site to AMP. So even the desktop version is actually an AMP page. So that's something that you could do as well, which makes the site really, really fast, and kind of make sure that we could pick up that AMP content when we do start showing different kinds of content there. The other thing to keep in mind is that AMP isn't just shown in Google search results. So there are a number of other sites that are planning, or I don't know if they're already showing AMP content in their services as well. So for example, I believe Twitter is going to start doing that. Pinterest, I thought, was another one of those sites that was going to start showing AMP content. So if you have content that's regularly reused in some of these other services, then that's definitely something that could make sense there as well. All right. Let me just double check to see what we're kind of looking at here. Oh, this is one I wanted to pick up as well. Are no indexed URLs being crawled in the short and long term less often than indexable URLs? Yes, in general, we try to crawl no-index URLs a little bit less frequently than normal indexed URLs, kind of like 404 pages, where we know this isn't content that we can actually show in the search results. So we'll try to sample them from time to time, but not crawl them with the same frequency as we would do that otherwise. Let me double check here. Here's another one kind of in the same theme, how to get Google to crawl my site faster. So I guess there are two aspects there. On the one hand, there's to do that without causing problems on your server. So that means that the server needs to be kind of snappy enough that there are not so many sites on the same server that we kind of get bogged down from that end, and that we actually recognize when we do crawl faster, we don't cause any problems. So that's the main thing we kind of watch out for, that when we crawl more on your website, that we don't see the server slowing down or start serving 500 errors. That's one thing there. On the other hand, we have to actually have content to crawl. So we have to have the URLs to keep showing in the search results. And finally, we have to kind of know about your new URLs, the new and updated URLs on your website, which is something that you can do with sitemap files. But I think one thing to really keep in mind with regards to crawling is that being crawled more frequently doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be ranking higher. That's something that is commonly kind of confused, where people will say, oh, I'll just resubmit all of my files every week so that they get crawled more frequently, and therefore Google will think my website is worth more or kind of more relevant to users. And that's definitely not the case. Just because we crawl more doesn't mean that we'll show it more in the search results. OK, let's just open it up for more questions from you all. What else is on your mind?
Hey, John, just a little bit of a follow-up from my question earlier about the URLs on a page that aren't links. We noticed in Webmaster Tools for links inbound to our site that sometimes you find where there's not actually a link tag on the site, and the algorithm picks that up. What we're kind of concerned about, not necessarily damaging us, but if we list these fraudulent site URLs on our site, will the algorithm be able to figure out that we're not trying to recommend that? Because we obviously don't want to do anything that would help them, because we don't want people to to be taken by a scam. So does the algorithm, is it able to figure that out?
So what generally happens is if we find a URL within the text of a page, so I think that's probably what you mean, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So we'll treat those as no-follow links.
Okay.
If we recognize a link somewhere in the text, we'll just say, well, this shouldn't be passing PageRank. There's no way to kind of put a no-follow there. Therefore, we'll just assume that there's a no-follow. What sometimes happens is we just double-check that URL to make sure that it's actually indexed, but it's not that there's any PageRank flowing from your site to the other site.
Okay, that's definitely, because we don't want to do that for those kind of sites. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's useful for users to kind of have that association to the other site, what you're talking about. And that's something we have to live with as well and kind of understand that.
Yep. All right, thanks.
Sure.
Hey, John. I have a fun question for you.
All right.
How is RankBrain going? Is it making interesting selections that you would not expect? Did you guys find anything surprising or funny about it?
Surprising or funny about it? I don't really have anything surprising or funny to kind of mention there. I mean, it works by understanding the query better. So it's not that it's making any kind of surprising or funny judgments on the websites or on the content that we find outside. It tries to figure out what kind of content is more relevant for those queries. And that's sometimes really hard, because a lot of the results where even when we look at that manually, we could have the ranking team say, well, I think this is more relevant, or this is more relevant, or they could both be relevant, depending on how you kind of try to interpret them. But those are the things that kind of keep it interesting. I think in general with machine learning, that's always interesting to kind of see what connections the computer comes up with that we might not have come up with ourselves.
And have any of those connections been? Can you share any of those connections that you thought were interesting, or?
I don't think we have any that we'd share there directly. So there's some sample queries that I believe Gary gave that we had in the RankBrain topics. The RankBrain article, there's an initial one. For example, the query with the without within the query. I thought that was really interesting because if you just look at the words, then obviously you'll try to find that word as well in the search results. But if you understand without actually means, but don't take this word into account, or kind of the words without that, then that's pretty neat. I really like that.
I tested that myself, and I couldn't seem to get Google to respond with a stop word like without.
Okay, I don't know.
It'd be really cool if that, because that'd be a really cool search feature if you could put without. I want to find all the results of bass bass fishing without bass guitars, or some kind of stop word in there. That'd be really cool.
Yeah. I think this is something that will automatically happen over time as more and more people search with voice. Because when you're searching on your phone with voice, you don't use kind of the mechanical structure of a query, like you would maybe like with a minus sign, those kind of things. You just like say it in natural language, and that's something we also see, or at least I see that when I do search trainings with kids, is that the next generation of people who are using search engines, they didn't grow up on kind of like keyword queries. They essentially ask a search engine in natural language. So that's something where I think this understanding of the natural language query has to kind of still continue happening there. And those of us, I guess like the older generation, who still has practice with like keyword, and then plus and minus and quotes and all of that, that should still continue working, of course. That shouldn't go away. But we kind of have to learn to understand the more natural statements as well.
And here's the most important SEO question of the day. How do you properly pronounce Gary's last name?
Okay. Oh gosh. I think he's on vacation, so I don't know. I'll try. It's something like Eish.
Eish.
Yes.
Okay, good. Because I hate people mispronouncing last names, as you can imagine. So Eish, fantastic.
Yeah. It's sometimes tricky, but luckily we're on a first name basis.
There you go. Thanks a lot.
Could we assume now that Gary's on vacation that Penguin won't be launched until he comes back?
I don't think he's launching it.
So no, it could launch without him around.
Yeah.
Do you think it will?
Do I think it will launch without him?
Yes.
I'm pretty sure that he won't be involved in the launch directly. So.
Will you?
Probably not. I mean, we have a lot of different things that are happening in search at the same time, so we can't all be involved, or otherwise nothing will move ever. Yeah.
Okay. What bugs you the most about what people are saying in the SEO community about RankBrain?
What bugs me the most? I don't know. It's hard to say. That's like a very tricky question, right? It's like, which of your kids don't you like, Alma? I mean, it's a very complicated topic because the whole machine learning, artificial intelligence kind of thinking is something that is very hard to pick up for a normal person to kind of understand. Well, what does this kind of tool do? And if I give it electricity today, will it take over the world tomorrow, or will it just give me better search results? Kind of like to understand what machine learning actually does, how it works, what kind of a tool it is. That's something that's not easily done. And I think there are some people within the SEO community who understand that a little bit better, and some people who are kind of like, well, generalizing and thinking, where would this lead in a theoretical world where algorithms are working on their own? But I think overall, machine learning is something we're going to have to kind of get used to. It's going to be used more and more. It's already used in a lot of places where we don't even realize it. Essentially, it's kind of taking the mechanics of an A/B test and turning that into something automatic almost.
John, since we're on that topic, well, on the penguin topic, I guess, I wanted to ask, since it's been like a year and something, almost a year and a half, other than the real-time aspect that's going to come with the upcoming update, are you improving it in different ways? Maybe is it better at detecting other types of spam links? Because I sent you, for example, a new report on people abusing advertorials with exact match anchor text, and this seems to be a big issue, at least over here in Romania. So I was wondering if the new Penguin update is better equipped to kind of deal with that, or are you still mostly relying on manual actions when it comes to that?
I think the manual action aspect is something that will always be kind of coming into play, especially with regards to links, because some of that really can't be algorithmically classified in a 100% certain way. So that's something that I think will always be coming into play there. With regards to what it will and won't do, I don't want to kind of go out on a limb and make any prognostics. So that's something where I know the team is working on more than just kind of like hitting the run button. So it's definitely not just a repeat of everything else. But at the same time, I don't want to make any predictions on what specifically will change.
Okay, so hopefully my spam reports are still helpful.
Yeah, I mean, this kind of data, these kind of link spam reports that you send, that other people send, that's always really useful for us. That's useful for the manual actions team, but it's also useful for the general search quality team to understand, well, these are the types of issues that people see popping up as a problem still today, and maybe we need to find some algorithmic way of attacking that to make sure that they don't cause problems in search. And maybe that means, well, we'll let people continue doing these crazy things, but we'll kind of ignore what they're doing or ignore the positive aspect of that and focus on the things that we can reliably understand better.
So do you think you rely less on actual penalties and more on just ignoring links that you don't think are organic, I guess?
I don't know what the future will bring, but I mean, with regards to pretty much all the web spam, the abuse side, there's always this manual aspect that kind of needs to play a role there as well, where someone can look at something and say, well, this was good or this was bad, and we need to manually step in to ensure the quality of our search results, that it doesn't cause problems there.
Right, I was mostly referring about Penguin, whether it will evolve into just identifying links and just ignoring them rather than actually apply some sort of penalty towards the rankings of the website.
I mean, those are essentially just different ways of looking at the same picture, right?
It depends what he means, because you can't, if a website is ignored, you can't pass on that ignorance, but you can pass on a penalty with links.
I guess
if you ignore a website altogether.
Ranking question almost. I mean,
isn't that what we're here for, though?
It's not very practical, but I mean, theoretically, you can think of any algorithm that takes into account all kinds of these variations.
Hey, John, a quick question regarding a site that copied content. Essentially, there's a site based in China that took our entire site verbatim, copied it, style, everything, just basically change the URL. We're unable to get it shut down because the web host in China doesn't respond to us. They are indexed. They do not outrank us on anything that we've seen. Is this something that we should be spending effort to do whatever we can to get them shut down, or what would you recommend Webmaster do?
I mean, in a case like this, I don't know, from a practical point of view, I just ignore it until it does cause problems. If the fact that there's a copy like that out there in the search results does cause problems for your site in search, then you could do something like a DMCA complaint, perhaps. I don't know. I can't give you legal advice on what you could do there, but that might be a route that would be open where you could do that through Google and say, well, I can't remove the site directly, but maybe depending on the legal situation, I can go through this DMCA process to have those individual URLs removed from the search results.
Okay, great. Thanks.
All right. With that, let's take a break here. It's been interesting having you all here again. Lots of good questions, good discussions. There's still some questions left over, as always. If I didn't get to your question and you really want to ask, feel free to jump it in, put it in the next Hangout, or maybe to ask in the help forums or one of the other Webmaster communities out there, so we can pick it up there. Again, thank you all for joining, and maybe I'll see some of you again in one of the future Hangouts.
As always, thank you for your concern for Webmasters, John.
Thanks to us. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, John. Bye. Thanks.